What you doing, Dad?
Just got to record this week's mock draft video.
Oh, Dad, you gotta get Devin Funchess late in the draft.
Devin Funchess?
Oh, you gotta get Ronald Jones, too.
Ronald Jones? Son of a... What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there. And here it is, Monday again already. Time for our mock draft video, right? We've done this for a few weeks, months at this point. Kind of hard to keep track of after a while. So I'd sat down and I got my browser all ready to get my mock draft all queued up to do the recording. And I just started thinking. And I reached out to a few of the guys here on the team and I said, listen, I need to talk something through because I don't want to become cookie cutter over here. A lot of people are going to start doing mock drafts and they're a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, we're not going to stop doing mock drafts at times, but we're all about adding value to this channel, right? We're trying to be different than everybody else because if we're just following the same things that everybody else does, you guys aren't getting a head up on the competition. Over here, we're trying to get fantasy football championships. We're not trying to finish fifth. That's not what this is all about. So I want to approach this a little bit different. And I'm going to ask a question, and then I'll give a few of the tips and answers throughout this video. But why do we mock draft? What is the purpose of mock drafting? Is it just to sit here and watch somebody pick some names that you may not agree with at times, just to see what the score is at the end of it? Because if it is, that's not what's giving you the value here. Like I said, we're trying to win fantasy football championships, and you guys need the tips to have a head up on your competition. So, in this episode, yeah, it's going to be about mock drafting, but it's going to be a few of the tips and tricks that you really need to focus on during your mock drafts so that when you're on the clock and the clock is ticking down, you don't panic and pick a crappy team. Now, I have a few tips here that we're going to go through. The first one, though, is going to have to do with the queue and utilizing it properly. Now, the queue, a lot of people don't even bother to use the queue, and I really don't understand why. This is how you always have a plan in place, right? Make sure that you're toggling through the positions. You're actually queuing up the players that you know that you actually want. Maybe the ones that you've done the research on, the ones that you're super high on. Go through and actually put them into your queue so that when you're on the clock, you know you at least have options. If you leave the queue empty, and maybe you leave this tab at the all positions all the time, this is a lot to decipher from and it can really throw you off your game pretty fast. I mean, there's numbers all over the place. Make sure you're sorting by position. You're picking the guys that you actually like, and you're adding them to your queue. You can always hit show more and find everybody that's there in your queue. Sometimes, on this site, you'll hear as somebody is taken out of your list. That's fine. You just keep adding guys that you know that you want at all the different positions. Don't just keep it running back, wide receiver. If you know you're holding on to a tight end to the later rounds and you know who you maybe want, go through there and get him. But for right now, just make sure that you have all the guys that you like, especially at the start of the draft. I would say the first 5 or 6 rounds, this is probably most important until you get to the really late rounds when you're looking for those sleepers, the guys that you've done your research on, the guys who you're excited about. Those are the guys you want to start putting in your queue so you don't miss out on them whatsoever. I mean, you can go a little bit further down the list if you know that there's guys down here that you want. By all means, add them to the queue. If they get taken right off, that's okay. Like I said, you don't want to panic when you're on the clock. A lot of people will kind of get thrown off. They'll see this timer up here ticking down, and they're frantically looking for, oh my gosh, who should I take? Who should I take? And more times than not, they'll take the guy who's on the top of the list. That's not always the best strategy, right? And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. Make sure you have options. Give yourself multiple options in the first few rounds. So when you're picking these studs, these top running backs, these top wide receivers, you have somebody in mind that once you go on the clock, you know who you're going to take. Another thing to really get in the habit of doing, follow the actual draft as you're going. Kind of get an understanding of maybe where some of your league mates are going with their draft strategies. That can kind of help you determine whether you may need to pick somebody a little bit early or maybe you can wait. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. When doing drafts, and whether it's online, in person, different sites, whatever it may be, do your best to follow along and see what other teams are going. I mean, this could be a huge help to you. I mean, just take a look at this draft board right here. By looking at it, we can see right here that I'm on the clock, this team, and this is just a sample mock draft. I can go a couple different ways, right? I don't have a tight end yet. I don't have a quarterback yet. I could be looking for my third wide receiver since I already have 3 running backs options, right? But let's look ahead. So maybe as I'm trying to determine who I'm going to take here, I can kind of have a guess who's going to come off the board after I make this selection. So the next pick after me, he can go a bunch of different directions, right? Because he's pretty balanced. 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a tight end. This guy's kind of a wild card. Not really understanding where he's going to go as of yet. Right here, this team, right, they already have 3 running backs. So are they going to go for another running back here? No, probably not. They could go tight end, quarterback, maybe a wide receiver 3, but more than likely they're not going to take 4 running backs there in the first 6 rounds. Same thing for this team. They've already taken 3. So now I know we have 2 teams right here more than likely aren't going to go running back. So they may fall a little bit further to me if I was looking for the running back position. Right here, these guys went early quarterback and early tight end. So they're not going to take another one right here. Maybe if there's a tight end that I really did want, maybe, Hunter Henry hadn't been picked here. I was hoping he'd fall to me. By looking at this, there's an opportunity that he does. These are just little things that you can pick up on as you're going through the draft. But if you pay no attention to any other team, you're kind of just hoping that they don't take the player right before you. If you can see that the guy before you is in need of a running back, and there's a running back on top of that board that you really want, you may want to have a plan B just in case. Because the last thing you want is to have the only player you have planned on taking getting taken the pick before you, and now all of a sudden you have 30 seconds to frantically scramble through a bunch of names trying to determine who the best possible option is. Take a look ahead. Take a look at what they've drafted. This could really help you when you come up to the clock, or even the pick before you're on the clock, to make sure that you're properly prepared. You have at least 2 options ready to go so that no matter what happens, you're comfortable taking somebody that you want and not just frantically clicking the mouse and hoping that you get a player that turns out to be pretty good. This is definitely something that a lot of people take advantage of, and if you do and do it correctly, you can kind of start to see some trends, and this is how you build an amazing roster, especially here in 2020 fantasy football. What about ADP? Understanding ADP, but then comparing that to site-specific rankings. We kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier when we were talking about the draft queue, right? That you don't always just want to go with the top name on the list. Yes, it's great to understand ADP, but let's be realistic here. In a lot of fantasy football drafts, some of the guys are just looking at the top 10 names on that board and trying to pick the best one. They're not even scrolling down because in their mind, they're reaching, right? They know what maybe this other ADP said somewhere else, so they don't want to go any further down. They got to stick there right at the top. A lot of people draft that way. Even people who have been playing fantasy football for decades draft that way. There is nothing saying that you can't use that scroll on the side of that player list. Now, understanding ADP is great, and it's a tool that we use a lot. But if you've noticed any of the comments in the comment sections of some of our videos, a lot of people are like, wow, there's no way that guy would fall here. In my mock drafts, he goes in round 3. You just took him in round 5. Why is that? That's because different sites have different player rankings in different orders. You need to understand that ranking ahead of time. A lot of different sites give you the ability to edit your pre-draft rankings. If you have time to do that, by all means, do that. However, if you change it, remember, your other league mates may not, and they may be going by that. So I always try to leave it the same so that I can kind of guess where people are going with their upcoming picks. Because like I said, a lot of people, probably 70% of the leagues that I still play in, people are still picking there at the top of that ranking. They're not, reaching, because in their mind, if they scroll down at all, they're reaching and they don't want to be criticized for it. Screw being criticized. You get the players who give you the best chance to win, and you need to identify some of these these trends that other teams are doing. Get your players while you can, and make sure that you understand that just because your ADP research says something doesn't mean that you have to wait until that round. Yes, you may think that they're of value in the 7th, but if these rankings, he's all of a sudden coming up towards the top of that list in the 5th, you better react early because he won't be there in the 7th. So make sure you understand that going in. Don't just, focus on sole ADP because every site is different. And the last thing you want to do is constantly have your guys taken before you get on the clock. What about draft grades? A ton of people obsessed with grades given by the sites that they're actually drafting on. Now, sure, once we get into draft season, a lot of people, especially on this channel, will throw their drafted team down in the comments and they want to know how they did. That's different. You're getting actual personal interaction. Don't be solely reliant on the grade that you receive from the site that you draft on. Why do I say that? Well, think about it, right? They have their predetermined rankings that you're drafting from. If you want the best grade possible, draft the guy at the top of the list every time. Now, some of you may be saying, I don't want the guy at the top of the list. Okay, then be prepared for a slightly lower grade, and that is okay. Who cares what that site says? Think of it like this. Maybe even just last year, which team do you think got the higher grade for the quarterback position? The one who spent a 2nd, 3rd round pick on Patrick Mahomes because he was the number 1 quarterback last year in everybody's rankings, or the team that drafted Lamar Jackson in the 8th? Sure, the higher grade probably went to the Mahomes team, but who ended up with the higher win total at the end of the season? The Lamar Jackson team. Don't get caught up with those grades at the end of your draft. If it gives you an A, feel good about yourself, but your work isn't done. It's just starting. Don't let your foot off the gas and don't stop paying attention because you think that you got the best team in the league. Ignore those grades. Ignore those projections. Find your guys that you need to help you win fantasy matchups and be damn the grade that you get at the end of it. It's not the all-knowing, the all-saying. It has no idea what's going to happen, just like nobody else does. So don't get caught up in those draft grades and don't draft trying to get a higher grade. More times than not, if you do that, you're going to end up with a team sitting right around 8-8 at the end of the year. That's where you want to be. Worry about grades. But if you want to win championships, you pick the better players, not just the guys on the top of the list. Last thing is going to be research, right? And it's super important. I mean, you don't want to just show up on draft day, wing it, and then piss and moan at the end of the year that you didn't win the money, you didn't win the bragging rights, you lost the trophy, whatever it may be. Research is super important, and I get a lot of people don't have a whole lot of time to put forth in the research that they really need to be successful in fantasy football. That's why we put out items like the draft guide this year, and that's why we put out videos almost daily that are shorter in nature to help you consume more material in a shorter amount of time. We get that not everybody has an hour just to sit there and listen to 3 guys or 4 guys talk. I get it, understand it. I don't have that much time either. But it's still important. And that research is what's going to separate you from your league mates and the other teams in that league. That's what's going to give you the best opportunity to win. Make sure you do the research beforehand. If you have to do your own research, if you want to use somebody else's research, whatever it may be, having an understanding of all the players available, not just the ones that you want, but all of the players that are available. Why would I say that? Well, everybody has value. And I've joked about this before with the likes of Ronald Jones and Devin Funchess. Everybody has value, even those guys, at a certain price. Now, do you want to pay up for those guys? No. But maybe the last rounds of your drafts, they're names that you may not, think twice about. But if you've never done any research on them, you have no idea what their situations are. You have no idea what they're surrounded by. You have no idea where they fall on the depth chart. That's just going to give you cause to make a draft day mistake. One of the most important things that I hear people say all the time is you won't, win your fantasy season during your draft. Understood. But you can lose it. And I say that by not making the right selections can really set your team up for failure for the next 16 weeks of your season. You don't want to be put in that situation. Now, every year, things are going to happen, right? Injuries are going to happen. Players are going to get suspended. Players are going to get hurt. Whatever it may be, those things are going to come up. Make sure you have a plan in place. And the easiest way to make that plan is to be prepared at your draft and have an understanding so that you have that depth on your team. You have those other options. Yeah, they may not be the sexiest options on draft day, But if something bad happens, you know you have a safe, solid, secure option on your bench to get you by until you can make a trade, pick somebody up off of waivers, whatever it may be. You always need to have a plan, and the best plan to have is a well-researched plan. That's why you take all that time to do it now. Gather your resources, because on your fantasy football draft day, you don't want there to be any doubt of what you need to walk away with in order to give yourself a chance at winning a fantasy football championship. Now, everybody can approach drafts different, right? I mean, there's a bajillion different ways to draft in fantasy football, whether it's heavy running back, heavy wide receiver, early quarterback, late tight end, whatever it may be. There's a ton of different ways to do it. There is no absolute right way. Most importantly, it's just understanding, right? Know your league settings, know what scoring is in your league, understand what players will excel in that scoring, the basics, right? It's fantasy football 101. And maybe you need more help understanding that, and that is absolutely fine. That's why we're doing videos like this in June, to make sure that by the time August comes around and everybody starts to draft, you are well versed in fantasy football and have no worries once you're on the clock and that time is ticking down. Now, there's a lot of other tips and tricks and strategies that we'll cover here over the coming weeks. So if you have questions, by all means, leave them down below in the comment section. Myself, another member of Headliner Nation, are here to help you out all throughout the offseason. We greatly appreciate the support. The channel continues to grow. We're making a push for 100,000 subs before the start of the season. Do I think we can do it? Abso-freaking-lutely, I think we can do it. We grew over 50,000 subscribers last year, and if you go back and look at some of our recent videos here, the comment section is littered with people saying, hey, thanks for helping me win last year. I'm glad to be back. Looking forward to more content. That's what really speaks volumes about a channel, is not me sitting up here telling you how great I am. Go look at the people who've been watching for years, find out their feedback. If they're happy, you may be happy too. So if you're looking for that type of content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We greatly appreciate the support. Hit the like button for me also. Likes greatly help us out this year on YouTube, all about that YouTube algorithm. But hopefully you guys had a great weekend, a great 4th of July week coming up here this week. We got plenty of videos coming out. Make sure you check them all out. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you later.